Greetings, this is just a short video, a little bit of extra credit here for you, for those folks who are interested in how to make fancy plots using R. Most of this material is again going to be covered in the next lab, but there's been some updates to RStudio that also make it relevant for us to do a little preloading for that lab so you know where the buttons are at. So we're going to go ahead and create a brand new R Markdown file. So we're going to come over here and click on the tab just like we did in our test file, and we're going to say make me an R Markdown. Then I'm going to go ahead and label that. We're going to label this as graphing fun, and we're going to make it an HTML file. But one thing I want you to notice, we'll talk about this in a minute, is that you have other options as to what you can do for your default knitter file. You can do a PDF or you can do a Word file. So we'll say OK. We get greeted with a brand new R Markdown file. We're going to go ahead and save that right away. So we'll go over to File, and we'll do a save. We'll get a dialog box. I'm going to come in here to R Files, make myself a new folder, call it Graph Fun, create that, call the file Graph Fun, and save it. Okay, there we go. All right, looking good. Now, when you create a brand new R Markdown file using that tab over there, it populates it with all the stuff that was in our test file. We don't want that stuff, so we're just going to get rid of that by highlighting all that and erasing it, and that gives us a nice clean file to put our stuff in. So what we're going to do here is we're going to learn just the basics of a couple of simple plots and how to label them. These plots will not mean a lot to you at this moment, but that's okay. We're just kind of showing you how using them sort of grist for the mill, and that's the main thing. All right, so let's go ahead and type some text here. So this is an extra credit activity. Okay, so when you knit something, all of that text that you mark will go right there. Now there's a couple of things that you can do to modify that text so how the output goes. So for example, I can use the hashtags, and the hashtags actually will change the text to be a header. Okay, so if I put H4, that would be 4 hashtags, and I can say this is the header for my file. Okay, notice that the color went to blue. So let's go ahead and just knit that real quick so we can see what happened there. Go ahead and bring this over, and notice that how when I push those put those hashtags in there, it changed this part of my text. I made it boldface, put it into a header format. So let's change the number of hashtags there. Let's go down to just 3. Let's go 2, and let's go ahead and knit it again and see what happens. Notice how much larger it made it, because that's now an H2 tag if you know a little bit about HTML. So the less of those hashtags you put in, the bigger we'll make it. The more of those hashtags you put in, the smaller it's going to make it. And you'll see in my template files, I use those hashtags fairly often to try and set up the problem headers for you. Okay, so good enough. Let's go ahead now and see about actually inserting a plot here. So to insert a plot, we're going to go up to the Insert tab up here. We talked about this a little bit earlier, and we're going to go to R. And when you do that, it says insert a new R chunk. Well, let's go ahead and insert a new R chunk. And we notice this grayed out area right here now gives us a place to type in R code. So one way of thinking about that grayed out area there, let me bring up here a little bit, is that's like working down here in the console. In other words, anything that you put in here would be R executable commands. They're not document things per chance. They're actually R code. So let's go ahead and input some data. We need some data to work with. So we're going to go ahead and label a variable. We'll call it X, and then we're going to put an equals. We have to create our own data using the C command. And as I will say many times, we can think about C as column. So it's a column of data that we're going to input, okay? And so let's put in some numbers here. Let's put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then, oh, that's good enough, okay? Now notice that I have to separate my entries with commas within the C command, but now that is actually going to be a set of data. So let me open up my environment tab for you here, and let me go ahead. Actually, I'm going to clean out my environment Should have done it before we started so you don't have a bunch of garbage in there. And now come over here and take a look. This is new in the newer edition of RStudio, is that there are these nice little buttons on the end of our chunk. So there is run the current chunk, there is run all of the current chunk, there is modify the header, the properties of the chunk. Okay, so for now I'm just going to do this one, which is I want to run my chunk. Okay, so if I run my chunk, notice I get the X values now showing up over here in the environment, so my numbers are actually input and ready to be worked with. Okay, all right, so let's go ahead and let's make a variable y, just so we have two variables here. And let's go ahead and put in some numbers in there. We'll put in 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. And let's go ahead and execute that. And now notice we get the y variable over there. Now, as it turns out, there's a nice thing in R that would allow me to do all of that without having to type those. If I just want to put in a sequence of numbers, a much simpler way to do that, let me go ahead and get rid of all these, would be to come in and put in 1:9. And when I do that, it will actually give me the exact same thing as if I had typed in all those numbers. So let me open up my console here so you can see a little bit. Actually, let me just come down here and echo it. I'll do it actually in my markup here. So if I want to echo X, all I have to do is say X, and it'll echo it for me. And notice there are my numbers 1 through 9, and I can say Y, and I can echo that. And notice there are my numbers for Y. Okay. All right. One of the big changes in RStudio is how the output, the preview from your chunks, looks as in past versions. In the past versions of RStudio, you saw your output not only in the console. I've got to pop the console open here for you. Not only in your console, but you also saw it over here in the tabs area over here under plots. Okay, so more about that in just a second. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's add a command into my chunk here where I actually plot X by Y. So let's just say plot X comma Y. Okay, now we've actually done a little bit of this in a previous lab. So let's go ahead and run that. Click on this over here, and notice this is different than when the previous versions of RStudio. It opens it up in a preview right in my RMD file. In years past, it would set it over here, and it would actually put it in the plots. And now notice it doesn't do it that way anymore. It lets you preview over here. Okay, very cool plot. I mean, I am super excited about it, but it turns out I would like to do something more than just put X and Y on the axes, and I would like to label my graph. So to do that, I'm going to put in a couple labels. I'm going to put in an X label, which we abbreviate XLab, which is a label for the X-axis, describes defaults to description of the X variable, and it's a really handy thing for actually labeling your X-axis with something besides just X. All right, so I'll put in the equals, and now I got to put in quotation marks. Anything that we input into R that we want to print within an R chunk is going to be wrapped up in quotations. So let's say that this is the first 9 numbers. All right, we'll just make it that label. Okay, now what about our Y lab? So our Y lab for Y label, and again, notice we get a hint on there right away, which is very nice. You can do autocomplete by hitting tab, and it'll put the equal sign in for us. And we will say some more numbers. Like I said, we're just doing this to kind of play to get an idea what's going on here. And then the third command of import is the main command. And what main does, we'll go ahead again and autocomplete there, is it gives us a title for our plot. So let's call this a sample plot. Okay, so let's go ahead and run our R chunk here. And notice now, what has it done? Let's go ahead and scroll down our console here so we can see a little better. Notice that it changed the labels on the axes, the first 9 numbers, some more numbers, and it gave us a sample plot there. Okay, that's pretty cool. That's actually really cool, and it's actually really important in the real world. A graph should be a standalone item. It shouldn't need a lot of narrative to be able to read the graph. So one last command is the color command. We'll go for col for color, and then we're going to make this very simple. We'll just give it a single color, let's say blue. There's lots and lots of options with the color command. And notice it made my circles equal to blue, didn't it, for my plot? Okay, all right, pretty good. Okay, so that's some pretty good stuff. What if I want to get this into a Word document? What if I wanted to actually take my output from what I'm creating in RStudio here and actually create a Word document that I can turn into one of my professors with the graphs inserted? Well, that's one of the very cool features about the knitter package is it will knit to a Word document. So if you come down and say knit to Word, notice down in the console it says I'm doing that. Give me just a minute here. That's what the little stop sign means. It says give me a second to figure this out. And notice it popped it open in Word for me. It actually created a Word document. Let me resize this so that it's a little bit easier to see here. Let's bump up the screen. And so notice it put in my R code and it put in the plot and it created, this is a Microsoft Word document. All right. Okay, so that's about it for now. Just a quick introduction to some of the plotting features. I'd said I was going to do some other plots. I think I'll save that for the next activity for you.